being live streamed.
Okay. We got it. All right. Whew. All right.
You in an Amazon warehouse, JD?
Oh, he's muted.
That's okay.
He's walking through the halls, though. All right. Good to see everybody. It's been a little bit of a zany week for me, getting back from Glacier, and then we have family visiting. Well, actually, I was at a wedding for my cousin, and then we have family visiting from Australia and a 2-year-old in the house, and a lot of insanity going on. It's fun. It's a busy, crazy summer period here in Portland at my house. And new camera stuff and all kinds of fun stuff. Plus, Rick and I are tooling up for the workshops for 2024. So we'll take a whole lot of questions today. I think Rick has a few announcements to put out before we get rolling.
So the next office hours will be September 5th. We're still working on a plan for what it's going to be about, but you can ask your questions as always. Woody will probably have the sign up for by the end of this hour, I imagine, the way he works. So, and then we've been working the last 2 months on the 2024 workshop schedule. We're trying to get things posted a little bit earlier. And so we thought this morning that basically we'd sort of walk through what the planned schedule is for 2024 with a little bit of info on how to sign up and all that sort of stuff. So I will share my screen. Hopefully.
Damn.
You see that?
I do.
How do I move this thing? Oh, there we go. Okay, let's move it over there. So it's very simple. There's just 2 pages. So we've got 8 workshops scheduled for 2024. A few of them, the ones in the middle, are locked in. And actually printing, I think we came up with dates too. It'll probably be early February like they were this year. So the printing workshops are just small 6-person workshops in the Printerville studio at Hudson's place. They're a lot of fun. We talked about them earlier this year.
Oh my gosh, it was literally just so much fun. I we hadn't done that before, but Rick and I are both so passionate about printing and turning it into this lab experience where everybody learned, collaborated, and got beautiful prints of their favorite images. Was just like such a fun, rewarding. It was great.
Yeah, it was a blast. And then so the spring workshops, we've got Charleston, Mazatlan for the total eclipse, and Costa Rica. Mazatlan is actually in the store. I'll talk about that on the next slide. Charleston, a number of people were unhappy last year that they weren't able to get in the Charleston workshop. We had such a back list of people who wanted in, most of whom were long-term alumni. And so the workshop actually never got posted. So we're going back actually the same time of year.
It ran, but never got posted.
Yeah. But it's a blast. This will be a 12-person workshop, co-led with David Archer. It's a lot different from many of the other workshops we do in the sense that you get, some street work. You get to be in this beautiful city with lots of great food, and David will take us to the Audubon Birds of Prey Center and to the swamp gardens, and you'll see nesting birds. It's an amazing experience. So that one's middle of March. The eclipse, I don't know, Hudson, if you want to say anything about the eclipse workshop, but we've been looking forward to that now for almost 2 years.
I think actually the first total eclipse workshop that we ran, was that 2017 that we
2017,
had? 2017,
yep.
Yeah. Was actually the first workshop that Rick was involved with. I think you were just sort of there helping out a little bit and experiencing it. And it was such a cool workshop in that we got to practice with our tools and sort of pretend the eclipse was happening each day in the lead up to the eclipse. And then the final day of the workshop, the big event happens and you've actually got all the mechanics of what you need to do to capture it down cold. And you just get to experience this really, I don't even know exactly how to describe the total eclipse. Being in the path of totality for a total eclipse, when you can take the glasses off and look at that little ring in the sky and get this 360-degree sunset all around you and these little sparkly moon shadows playing all over the ground, and it gets 15, 20 degrees colder. Suddenly you want a sweatshirt. It is an amazing event. And I'm really excited that the one that we're going to be photographing this next year is twice as long, the duration of totality. You know, we had like 2 minutes for the one in 2017. We get over 4 minutes for this one. And those 4 minutes are just fantastic. You know, I'll never forget the group of people that we were with when we were in the total eclipse. Forget the photography, just the experience of being in it is so profound. And Mazatlan, you know, I've been researching and going over maps, and you know, Mazatlan has the perfect climate. I went and checked the place out this year, this spring, to make sure that it's suitable. You know, I was there, 15 years ago on a family trip, and just remember that of all those kind of coastal tourist cruise ship cities that I went to in Mexico, it was my favorite because it felt more authentic in the old city proper. And it still has that amazing feel to it. And it's also a place that has one of the largest carnival, you know, crowds in the world. It's in the top 3 carnival destinations in the world. So it's set up to handle hundreds of thousands of people coming in. And the place that we've got dialed in, we have this cool old historic hotel, which is now run surprisingly by Best Western, which makes me actually feel even better about it. In the old city, walking distance from these great restaurants and hotel, and a wonderful place on the coast to photograph the eclipse. Has room for everyone, a rooftop pool and bar. It's a cool old funky hotel. We won't need to go anywhere. Basically, get shuttled into the hotel and we can walk or take these plentiful little golf carts with VW engines, because for 50 years they built the bug in Mazatlan. It's going to be a blast on the Sea of Cortez, and the climate, there's like 1/1000th or 2/1000th of an inch of rain in April. It's about 56% humidity, highs in the low 80s, lows in the high 60s, low 70s. It's kind of perfect. So I'm looking very much forward to being there with a group of photographers.
Yep. And then we've got, what?
Isn't that a good kiting spot also? Is that the time of year or not?
Across the Sea of Cortez, and the spot where my family goes, it's like a 15-minute flight to my favorite place to kite on the planet. On the other side, there are a few people that kite. I saw a few kites, but not in the old part of Mazatlan where we're going to be.
We don't need you being distracted.
No, it's a good thing. It's a good thing for everyone, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
My second passion isn't going to engage.
Yep. So we've got our second Costa Rica workshop as well, not long after the Eclipse workshop. And this is another one where we'll get David along with us, and this amazing guide. You might want to talk about Dennis a bit. This one is just, I mean, if you're into wildlife, it's a pretty crazy place to be. All right. And Glacier, did we lose Hudson? No.
Nope, I'm here.
Okay. Glacier, we just finished up our first Glacier workshop. We're pretty much doing the same thing next year. We're going to spend some time both in West Glacier and St. Mary. It'll be a little bit different, but the general workshop will be the same. We've got an Oregon Coast workshop it'd probably be depending on when Scotland goes, it will either be the right after Labor Day or right before Labor Day. And then a lot of people, we've been talking about Scotland, where we've got a scouting trip later this year to Scotland for a workshop. Once we return from that, we'll finalize the plans for the workshop there next year. But that is one that, I mean, it's kind of like the last Charleston workshop. The list of people wanting to go on that one's pretty big at this point. So
And we've got a pretty spectacular itinerary planned. We're just going to go make sure that it all works out perfectly
Right.
for a workshop group. So we won't have any fun on the scouting trip. Don't worry.
No, it's work. It's
Yeah,
work.
totally. I will just mention that, Costa Rica and Glacier are wonderful wildlife workshops. Costa Rica is not as much of a landscape workshop. It is wildlife nonstop, start to finish, from the second that we hit the road to evening when we're done. It's just, you won't believe how many wildlife shooting opportunities you're going to have. Glacier is that rare combination of spectacular, big Rocky Mountain wildlife blended with some of the most beautiful mountain scenes in the world. And the Oregon coast, we always run, we have learned over the years the best time of year to do it. It gives us a potential opportunity to shoot, constellation or Milky Way work, and it's less likely to have that coastal marine layer that time of year, which is why we run it each year in the end of summer. So
Okay. All right. So just some updates on sort of when to expect things. The last couple of years we've been trying to get most of the workshops posted, in the fall before winter. We're trying to be a little bit more forthcoming earlier in the previous year so people can plan. So Mazatlan is live in the store right now, and as of this morning, we have 3 spots left for it. I'm working on the Costa Rica, Charleston, and Glacier descriptions, and those should be in the store in mid-August. The rest will come over the following few months. I mean, printing, we'll probably put up the printing workshops in August as well. The coast and Scotland ones, as I said, we need to make sure of when Scotland's going to be before we post the coast workshop, and we'll do a little bit more research there. So if you want to be notified when a workshop is posted, you need to send an email to me. That's rick@hudsonhenry.com, and put 2024 workshop request in the subject line. That helps me sort of filter things so that I don't get someone saying, hey, I sent you an email asking to be on the list. And list the workshops you want to be notified about. It's not really helpful to say all. Most people have an inkling they like to do this one or that one, and we've given you dates so you can sort of check dates when you might be traveling. And note that just because you send in and say notify about it, it doesn't mean that we're guaranteeing you a spot in the workshop. For some workshops, alumni who've been with us for a long time get first shot at them, and this is what happened in Charleston, was that all alumni signed up for it initially. We do keep the waiting lists open should people fall out over the course of time. And the workshop page is shop.hudsonhenry.com/collection/workshops. If you could put that in the chat, Daryl, that'd be great. And so the way that we're expecting this to work is, if you're on the waiting list for a specific workshop, a few days before, I'm thinking like on a Monday morning, you'd get an email from us saying, this workshop is opening later this week on such and such a time, on such and such a day. So it'll probably be like noon on Thursday. And you'll get the PDF description of the workshop so you can see all the information. And then, like I said, it will go live at the time we specify, and you can sign up there. And that'll be before we make any announcement about this workshop or that workshop. So that's kind of what I had. Let me stop share.
Hey, I thought I'd chime in really quick about, because we've been getting, I've had a number of people emailing, and I'm sure some of those people are here. I've just been so slammed the last few days. About logistics for getting to Mazatlan. If you go searching for flights, you're likely to find that Alaska at the moment is sold out for a lot of the dates that we're talking about for that trip. Or if they have flights, they're adding flights every now and again. And when they do, it's about $1,000 each way. Alaska is quite hip to the fact that Mazatlan's a good place for this workshop. So the trick really is to book a round trip flight into either Mexico City or San Diego, and then you hop Volaris, which is a modern, nice Mexican airline, on one of their many flights from either Mexico City or Tijuana to Mazatlan. They have lots of flights. Those are not jacked up beyond realm. I mean, it needs to happen fast for those of you that have signed up. And if you're going through San Diego, there's a very simple, you just hop in an Uber from the San Diego airport and go to the Cross Border Express. It's like probably a $40 Uber. And they take you to this really modern border crossing terminal that goes right into the Tijuana airport. It's like you go through this killer modern border crossing and boom, you're in the terminal ready to check in for your flight. It's quite simple. So that's the way to do it if you want to save a bit of money. Or you can wait till Alaska adds another flight, and it's going to be a couple $1,000s to use Alaska to get there. So.
Yeah. Part of the reason we're posting this now is because we're on the edge of that. You know, when things are going to start selling out, people start moving around. So
the big world eclipse travelers are largely headed for Mazatlan. It's going to be a great spot. And there's lots and lots and lots of accommodations there. There's high rises, 20 kilometers of beachside white sand Malecone running through these Vegas style big high rises. That's not the part we're going to. We're going to the old city, which has this beautiful rocky shoreline. We can go on the sandy beach if we want, but that part of town has fabulous gourmet restaurants and interesting backdrops and a funicular up to these cliffside gardens and all kinds of fun stuff to do where we don't need to drive or move at all. We can walk from our hotel to all that. So my whole goal is to really not need to drive at all. So having experienced driving in an eclipse zone in 2017.
all right. Well, let's see. I think, do you have any questions over there on any of the workshop stuff other than Darren?
No, just a remark from Patrick in Surrey that in the UK, 2090 is the next full eclipse for them. So, destination the UK in 2090 for all of our children, I suppose.
I'll put a note for Pike and Pepper.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So unless you've got anything else, Hudson, I'll sort of jump into questions. We've got a bunch of questions. As most people would imagine, that there is a large number of Nikon questions. So I'll start off with something other than Nikon.
Yeah. Well, quick, I'll just say that yesterday, the B&H box finally arrived after ordering the morning that my Q3 was announced. And I've been for now about 12 hours having a lot of fun with this little guy. It's, I don't think you need to run out and sell your Q2 right away if you have one, but the Q3 is a sweet little machine and I've been having a ton of fun with that. So I'm in like a mind mode at the moment, but I can talk Nikon stuff too.
Yeah, I don't have any Q2 questions. So other than when do people think they will arrive?
Who knows?
Actually, Jim Orsetti asks, would you use your ND filter on your Q2 or Q3 to shoot midday infrared sunlight?
Yeah.
And that's not just the Q. That's, we've been.
Well, interestingly, the Q goes to this just insane shutter speed, like 20,000th of a second. I can't remember exactly, maybe 16,000th of a second. It's like the Z8, Z9 with the electronic shutter. It goes so fast that it's not necessary to have a UV filter to shoot at f1.7 in pretty bright conditions. I mean, it's not a terrible idea, particularly, if you want to not have such a fast shutter speed. The reason I have used ND filters with the Q, and the reason why I keep a little package of 82 millimeter case filters with an adapter ready to go on the Q series, is that I like to do creative effects. I'll blur clouds and do a 120 second exposure, which you can program in right with the shutter dial, and blur clouds and water motion and things like that. Long exposure creative stuff, absolutely. But they're smart enough, knowing that they have a 1.7 aperture, that they give it a really fast shutter speed. I think the big reason in Cuba why I carried around the Z6 II with the 1.2 Nikon 85 millimeter lens, I needed a 3-stop filter, is that camera maxes out at 2,000th of a second. And that just wasn't quite fast enough. So.
Okay.
Or 4,000 a second.
Had a few filter questions. Fred asks about what are the best way to avoid vignetting when stacking filters.
Yeah, I mean, I am constantly urging, and I'll just demonstrate here. Buy the biggest set of filters you can rationalize carrying. Now, this is a full set of 82 millimeter case Revolution filters, and I've got a neutral night, a UV, polarizer, 3, 6, and 10 stop neutral densities all in here, along with the little adapter that threads on here. And because I'm shooting this smaller lens through an 82 millimeter filter, I can stack as many filters as I want without any kind of fear of vignetting. That's why I love the 112 millimeter filters for the Nikon system, particularly since they have that HB97 hood, which comes stock with the 14 to 24, but you can buy, and that fits on all the 2.8 zooms and the 51.2 and the 14 to 30. It's just by shooting through a wider filter than your lens, you can put as many filters on as you want without fear of any vignetting. The other thing that's great are these magnetic filters are so thin. That's one of the things I love about Case is it minimizes vignetting right off the bat. So that's my big take on minimizing vignetting is just simply, don't buy the same size filter as your lens thread, buy a bigger one. That's why I really like stock 82 and 112 millimeter filters. And sometimes I have people special order 95 millimeter filters. If they're, instead of using the 14 to 24, they don't have those 2.8 zooms, they're using the 14 to 30, and like me, the 24 to 120, the 100 to 400. That's a wonderful little travel trio, and a 95 millimeter filter is plenty big enough. You just use a magnetic filter adapter. You need an 82 to 95 and a 77 to 95, and you got all of those lenses covered. So I do special order 95s for people too.
Yeah. So Carl March asked about if the Case makes an adapter for the Z400 28 TC and the 600, which allows use of their 150 millimeter round filters over the front element.
And the 800, like I
and
have.
800 as well. And he says, while these lenses have rear filter holders, the front filters, are they an option for protection and or solar eclipse photography? He's just wondering if you've got any experience or thoughts about it. He says they're pretty pricey and he'd rather not purchase them on a whim.
Well, Carl, I have the one for the 800. They shot me one, and I'm not. It's great. It works just fine. I prefer Carl Zemlin's new, the press fit lens cap that fits on, and I love his hoods that he's 3D printing, and you can't use both at the same time. So I've chosen to go with the Zemlin hood and the Zemlin lens cap. That's not a lens that I'm hauling along hiking, getting sunscreen and sweat on the front element. If I use it, I have a hood which protects the front element. And I find that with the hood on it, I don't get a whole ton of dust and dirt and grime and stuff. So I'm not trying to protect it from UV. I like the Case drop-in filters for the back for a polarizer. I thought, why will I ever need a polarizer for an 800? But, when you're shooting wildlife and water, you can really control reflections nicely. As far as the Eclipse, I don't know. I'm not sure. I haven't seen a 150 millimeter 16 stop ND filter. Maybe they exist. You could certainly use the Case adapter if that's the case. I don't know of any drop-ins either. I've had a lot of people asking me about filters. I'm actually going to throw it in ATS next week. I'll give you a little preview that I think that if you have one of the Case magnetic sets that we sell, if you have the 6 and the 10 stop filter, you can just stack those two like we were just talking about, and you have the same thing as a 16 stop filter for the Eclipse. But again, the only real reason you need the 16 stop filter for the Eclipse is when it's either angular, meaning that the sun is larger than the moon and it's not really going to block it. It's not a total eclipse. You're not ever going to be able to take off your glasses or leave your sensor unprotected. Or it's in that partial phase leading up to the eclipse. And I don't know of a whole lot of 600, 400, 800 millimeter shots of a partial eclipse that are all that fantastic, where it's just the sun. Being partially obscured. I think more of that is like a landscape scene. Maybe you're shooting that with your 24 to 120. or your 24 to 70. And that's where you're going to put that 16 stop filter on. Maybe you've got, the scene where you've got the partial. You're using your intervalometer, taking a shot every 20 minutes, and then you composite those into the scene with totality in the middle where you're going to pull the filter off for totality in a total eclipse. You're not going to need a filter shooting that 4 minutes of totality in Mazatlan with your 400 or your 600. There's no filter needed for that. You can take your glasses off, look right at the ring. There's not that much dynamic range. You can bracket 5 exposures, 3 stops apart, and get all the tonality, and you're not worried about damaging your sensor any more than you would be shooting a Sunstar, even less actually. So I don't know that you need that. And so that's my take on it.
Okay. Todd asks about pros and cons of clip-in filters versus the magnetic ones.
I got excited about them when the Z6 and Z7 launched and Case came out with them. I thought, whoa, what a cool idea. It's particularly, the night filter. You're going to be shooting Milky Way. You've got that. They had a little suction cup thing. You could grab the filter out of its little case and push it into kind of where the mirror box would be in a DSLR, but sort of the shutter area, and clip it in there. And they worked okay, but they're just a pain to get put in correctly, to get taken out without touching with your fingers. And you've got your sensor open to the air for a whole long time. And I just find them a pain and fiddly, and you can't stack them and combine them. And now that we have the magnetics that work so well, particularly the Revolutions, the more I'm using them, the magnetism is just amazing. It's hard to knock off the lens. The color coding, the stackability, the simplicity of use. I just, I haven't gone back to those clip-in filters in a really long time. And I still think they're only really designed for the Z5, Z6, Z7 series cameras. The 8 and 9 are significantly different. And I don't think that was a big selling product. So I haven't seen any update to make them for the Z8 and Z9.
Yeah. I tried the clip-in filters for a bit too, and they're just, fiddly is a good word for it. I was always afraid that I was going to drop one of them on the ground and not be able to find it or scratch it up. The only sort of non-front ring filters I've ever used with any success were the ones that go on the back of the lens. There was one for the Sony 14 millimeter 1.8 lens that I could put a night filter on the inside, and that was great. That was really good because there was no way to put a filter on the front element. But I agree, the magnetic ones are pretty good. And our friend Bruce in Glacier, he actually color coded the Revolutions, the old one of the Wolverines. He color coded his Wolverines with some type of marker, which I thought was pretty ingenious. So, all right. Speaking of Bruce asks, what's the least used photo gear item you have, and why do you keep it?
It's a little teeny tiny. Actually, I could go grab it. Fisheye, F mount fisheye. I don't think Rick's ever seen me use it, but I have used it. It's a little 16 millimeter 2.8, and it's so tiny. And every now and then, it's fun to use, and it's not worth that much to sell on the used market. And it doesn't cost much to toss in your bag if you ever thought the fisheye could come in handy. I'll probably take it to Scotland and play around with it. Maybe even the coast, since I haven't used it in a while and you remind me of it. But this is probably the least used item that I still own. And it's so tiny and cute, has great image quality. I just don't shoot a lot of fisheye.
Okay. All right, I'll ask one more gear question, then we can move on to the main course.
The Nikon stuff.
Nikon. Well, I got one Sony question.
Oh, cool. All right. Maybe we'll lead off with that one.
But Tom says, looking at the Cuba videos, he saw you were wearing a camera harness with your Q2 attached, black strap as well, but nothing was attached and none in view. He says he struggles with camera straps while walking through woodlands with a long lens. He'd like to carry a second camera for close objects. What would you recommend for a walkabout with a couple of cameras? Maybe even some binoculars.
Maybe I need to do another video, but I've done a lot of videos about our favorite camera strap, handmade by our friends here in Portland, Oregon, who are absolute perfectionists. The LumaLab strap is so simple. You can adjust it for your preferred torso length with this back adjuster. And then the front one literally is very simple to lengthen and shorten. And it's got a QD on the side, which all of your best L brackets from Kirk, Really Right Stuff have built-in QD ports. This is the Q2s. This is the Z6-2s. My Z9 is sadly off right now for repairs, but I have carried my Z9 by the QD port on the foot of the 800 PF through the mountains of Costa Rica, bouncing off my side for days on end. This is a mil-spec piece that's really was designed in conjunction with Enforced Special Forces to carry assault weaponry around in serious situations. It has these 4 little bearings. It rotates and swivels. It is tiny. It just plugs into a port and you push a button to release and it lets those 4 bearings loose. All 4 have to release to come out. It swivels. It's just fantastic. And I wear this comfortably under my pack in a lot of situations where it just is under my pack strap. It's a really nice, comfortable little padded leather pleather piece, I guess I'd say, that goes over your shoulder. I'll throw my pack over the top of this and just have my camera ready to access whenever I want. So I have it linked on my links page. You can go to their website. You can get 10% off of it with the code Hudson 10. That lets them know that it's an affiliate link from me. They make great stuff. They're a tiny little company of 2 guys running it, perfectionists. I haven't used another strap since I got this. I love it.
Yeah, and I second that.
And the first thing I did with the Q3, I don't have an L bracket for that. I'm going to try to modify the Really Right Stuff Q2 one, was get a universal camera plate from Kirk that has a QD port, because there's no other way I want to carry the camera around.
Yeah. And Carl notes that it's out of stock now.
Yeah, they'll get them in stock. You just email them.
You know, they're a small company.
They're small. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
sometimes
But
you have
they're
to
cool.
wait, but I would definitely, if you've been looking for a strap and struggling, the Loop is the best one out there.
It is.
All right. Okay. Well, I'll ask the Sony question. Doug, this is for you. So the new Sony 6700, A6700, which is their APS-C camera, and it's wondering about selling his 6600 and his A7R3 to simplify his kit. You know, a few years ago, I thought, you know, I had the A7R3, which is only 42 megapixels only, right? And, you know, getting the I think back then it was the 6300 or 6500, which was like, you know, 20 megapixels, APS-C, so you get a little bit more reach on your zoom lenses. And I was kind of thinking about it the way Hudson uses his, what is it, the Z50?
Mm-hmm.
Or what was it? No, what was the DSLR you used for so long? The
D500.
The D500 to sort of get that reach when you're out shooting wildlife. It's hard for me to see giving up the A7R3 for the 6700. You know, you've got fewer megapixels. You do get more reach, but you know, I might sell the 6600 and the A7R3 and get an A7R4, which is still available for a lower amount of money and 60 megapixels. And in APS-C mode, you know, you're still getting, you know, close to what you'd get in resolution with the 6700. And that would be my take on it.
Yeah.
I mean, I looked at the 6700 and I'm like, yeah, it looks great, but
I haven't really looked. Does it have a better viewfinder?
It does have a slightly better viewfinder. Yeah.
Yeah, because that was my I had the 6500 and I just the viewfinder was so inferior to the 7 series cameras and the Nikons that I was just like, woof.
Yeah, I love the A7R5. I think the A7R5 is a great camera. There are days when I miss the A1 mostly for the blackout free viewfinder, but it's hard to beat. And I've become a convert to shooting in APS-C mode on that camera. I'm using APS-C mode. I'm shooting with it right now, and I'm using APS-C mode on my 20 millimeter 1.8 lens just because it's the best thing I've got for shooting video.
Yeah.
So
I will make an admission. I broke down after having the Z8 and the Z9 for a while, before I sent my Z8 back. I couldn't really rationalize two of the same cameras in different body formats, but I really fell in love with filming and doing this kind of thing with the Z9 because the Z6 II that I had been using, which I still love to shoot and carry around like I did in Cuba, it times out at 29 minutes. It gives me no outward appearance of whether or not it's filming. It has all these limitations. So I'm filming this right now with a little Z30 that I picked up because it gives me a red light to let me know it's happening. It transmits a lot of data about what's happening to an external monitor if I want. It's just a way better video camera. And the APS-C sensor is great. It's the same sensor as the Z50. It's just it has some modern video, and it doesn't time out. It's as long as you've gotten the card, it'll film. So,
okay, all right. Well, let's go on to Nikon-a-Palooza.
I sort of kicked it off with the Z30 there.
Yeah. So there are a bunch of questions just sort of like asking about this. That right now it doesn't exist, right? The 180 to 600.
Right.
I'm seeing stuff from people who are like, where is it? When is it coming to? Should I be selling my 100 to 400? Jay asked that very thing. He's got the 100 to 400, mostly landscape and industrial photographer. He has the 100 to 180. Or he likes that range, and he also likes the 24-120. He's like, would you sell your 100 to 400 and get the 180 to 600? He does have the 1.4 TC, and a couple of other people have sort of said the same thing to me. Of course, my response is always buy Sony, but
is it really? Not really.
Well, to Gary Sharlock, it is.
Only in jest. Stick with what you know. And you're invested in, unless you really have some good reason not to. I say, my view on the 100 or the 180 to 600 may be mildly controversial in that I know a lot of people loved it, and apologies to Sandy and some of the people who love it. I really never liked the 200 to 500's image quality and handling and size. And this is the modernization and mirrorless update to that lens. It's big. It's bulky. It's got to have sacrifices made to get from 180 to 600. I said that too about the 24 to 200, and it's a far, far better lens than I ever thought it was going to be. I borrowed Charlie Johnson's and shot some with it, and we did some sort of back-to-back stuff with the 24 to 120 and the 70 to 200. Shooting some long stuff, and it acquitted itself much better than I expected, but it couldn't compare to the 70 to 200. Not a shocker, right? The 100 to 400 that we have right now in the mirrorless, the S lens, is astounding. There was a long time where I was really jealous of Canon's 100 to 400 f4 back in the DSLR days because it was so good, and it was small. It was like the same size as my 70 to 200. It had that extra reach. It had amazing image quality. We have so much better ISO performance in the modern era that we didn't need that 2.8, particularly for well lit wildlife and landscape type work. And then, Sony got its amazing 100 to 400, and I was super jealous of that too. We still had this old slow focusing 80 to 400 that Nikon had made forever for the F mount. When the 100 to 400 came, it just blew me away. It is such a high quality lens. They did not skimp on optical quality. They went big, they went bold. It's not the smallest 100 to 400 f4 on the market, but man, it may be the sharpest. And it is a wonderful lens, and it performs great with the 1.4 teleconverter on it. I have every expectation that the 180 to 600 will not be long in my studio. I'll review it. I'm sure it will be better than I expect it to be, just like all the Nikon glass is. But the fact that it's not S badged tells you something too. and the 100 to 400 is S badge. That's their prestige line. You know, that's the one that's built to a higher optical standard and higher weatherproof standard. It's a lot smaller in your bag. It's a really, really nice piece of equipment. And when you put the 1.4 teleconverter on it, it's a what is it? A 140 to 560, pretty darn close. So I wouldn't be rushing to get rid of your 100 to 400 to buy the 180 to 600. Certainly wait around to see what people think. The test samples that I've heard, you know, Nassim Mansurov did his photography life review of it. It was, you know, the initial impressions where it's far sharper than you'd expect. A good quality optic for those on a budget who really need an all-in-one like that. It'll be interesting to see how reviews versus the 100 to 400 on optical quality go. As far as when is it going to be here, who knows? You know, people have been screaming for it. They put the announcement out. I ordered it, you know, I was one of the very first MPS orders and I have not heard peep. So, you know, until I get it, I doubt very many other people are going to get it either. I will
say that if there's one lens that I've seen in everybody's kit in workshops over the last couple of years, it is their mirrorless version of the 100 to 400, whether it's the Sonys, whether it's the Nikons, whether it's the Canons.
Yeah.
And I will also say that I cannot recall a single person on any of those three platforms complaining about the 100, 400. If anything, they're talking about how versatile it is as a, I mean, it's hard for me to see trading in a lens like that for something that, you know, might be okay, but I can't see even how it's going to really do great with the 1.4 on it. Will the 1.4 even work on it?
I think it's supposed to. I'll test it.
Okay. Well,
you know, I don't, it's interesting. Yeah. I got rid of my 70 to 200 2.8 because it was sitting collecting dust after the 100 to 400 arrived. I just can't ever imagine a situation where I throw both in my bag or when I would choose the 70 to 200 over the 100 to 400. I can't.
Yeah, so, I agree.
I can, but it's called a second camera on the sideline, Hudson.
Yeah, no, I get that. I fully get that. You know, absolutely. I think a great combination would be the 70 to 200 2.8 and the 400 4.5. That's like a crazy lightweight, amazing kit. You know, and you have the 1.4 you can toss on the 400 if you want. But yeah, for me, it's the 24 to 120 and the 100 to 400 and the 1.4 teleconverter. Boom. You know, it's just that's for 99% of situations. That's all you need.
Yeah. Yep. A couple of other lens questions. Walt asks, he has the 85-1.2. What else would you recommend for portraits?
I don't know that you need a whole lot else except maybe environmental portraiture. You know, the 50-1.2 is an amazing lens. The 50-1.8 is an amazing lens. I'd love to try. There's a 35-1.2 coming. I would think maybe the 35 and the 85 if you just love portraiture and you want to do more environmental stuff. But also the 35-1.8 is amazing. And I think I mean that 85. I have the 105. I love that lens. That and my 50-1.8. And I'm a pretty happy guy. It's funny you asked that. Viltrox sent me this they have a new line of Z lenses, the Viltrox Pro. And, you know, I don't know how the image quality is going to be. I literally got it yesterday. It came at the same time as the Q3 and I haven't played with it yet, but it's a 75 1.2 autofocus lens for the Nikon Z. So, I will be putting that to the test. It has a nice feel to it. I'm curious about it. That definitely doesn't solve your issue, but I think the primes are tough to beat when it comes to portrait photography. You know, for me, the 105 1.4 combined with the Q2 or the Q3 with its 1.7 just amazing lens is pretty tough to beat.
Yeah, I've got the Sony 35-1.4 and the 85-1.8, and they're both great portrait lenses, and they're easy to carry around too.
Yeah.
I had Sony's 85-1.8 for a while, but it's just such a big, heavy lens, or 1.4 rather.
I mentioned that I went to my cousin's wedding. It was this really intimate, small, only 18 family members in the Redwoods. It was beautiful. There was no official photographer. They asked people to bring cameras and take some pictures. And I brought the Leica, the Q2, and I brought the Z6 II with the 105 1.4, the old F mount on the FTZ. And Stacy, my wife, and I, she's a really good photographer too. She won't admit it, but she is. We traded back and forth who was shooting with which, and they loved the images that came out of those two cameras at the event. It's just like the perfect combo. For me, the 35 and either the 85 105-ish kind of long, wide aperture portrait lens. I mean, that's just an amazing, amazing combination. A fast 35 and a fast 85 to 105. Incredible. 135, any of those.
Well, continuing the lens theme, Richard is planning a trip to Antarctica, and he's got the 14 to 30, 24 120, 100 to 400 plus the 1.4 teleconverter. He's feeling like he wants to take the 500 PF. Would you add that to the group?
Oh, that's a tricky one. The 400, the 100 to 400 is such a good sharp lens at 400, and it's at like f5.6 at that point. Sure, you'd be a little faster. The 500 PF is a wonderful, small, nice handling lens. I think when you're in Antarctica, you're not going to be wanting to change lenses more than you need to. And you're limited in what you want to carry, when you're on the Zodiac or when you're, doing, I think with the 100 to 400, and you'd be better off maybe taking the 1.4 teleconverter. The 500 is a wonderful lens. Don't get me wrong. It's so sharp and it's so great, and it handles great on the Z cameras. There's no reason not to. I think you're well covered from 14 to 560 if you bring the 1.4 teleconverter and leave the 500. But I don't think that the light is going to be a significant problem for you at the time that most people go to Antarctica. You're going to have light kind of around the clock. So yeah, that's my take.
Okay. Any tips on how to aim that big honking 800 millimeter?
What's our mantra, Rick?
I don't know.
Practice, 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 practice. I will tell you, come to Costa Rica with us this spring. You'll never have a problem aiming that thing again. When I got to Costa Rica, I had that lens for 3 weeks or something. And I spent so much time with it where I'd pick it up and then I'd be, it was constant. I'm just like all over the place. Like, where is this? And now, by the time I was 3 days into Costa Rica, I was like, whoop, on subject, or whoop, which is something I see David Archer do a lot. If everybody can see me, if I'm big enough screen, it's that pop up on target. Oh, I'm not quite there. Just peek your eye up like you're sighting over the barrel and back in, and you're on. And it's just practice. I have zero problem popping up on target with the 800 now. And it just is because I've done it thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And if you go with us in Costa Rica, you'll probably do it 1,000 times the first day on little fast moving monkeys and trees, and you'll get good at it.
What? Monkeys?
I know. Yeah. Well, there's birds too.
I got 2 follow-ups on the Antarctica question. Sandy says you should check the regulations in Antarctica to help knowing what lens you want. She says, I don't know what they are now, but they've changed a lot as to what you can do when on the actual ground. And she says you may want longer lenses than what I actually needed when I went. Bill Marhofer says something very similar. He brought he's a Sony shooter. He brought the 100 to 400 Antarctica last year, and sometimes he wished he had brought the 200 to 600 instead for some long-range bird photos. But may do with the 100 to 400. It's much easier to travel with and more versatile. But he said definitely carry 2 cameras with different focal lengths mounted if you can do that.
Yeah, you don't want to be changing lenses a lot out there. I don't
No.
think. Very dry, very dusty. That's interesting. I think that for the Nikon shooter, yeah, I guess the 500, I just don't think it buys you that much more than the 100 to 400 with the 1.4 teleconverter, particularly if you're not, I mean, and it's only like 2/3 of a stop faster, the 500. Yeah, and they both handle quite well, and you get the benefit of having those lens buttons for the hybrid autofocus method with the 100 to 400, and just a little better handling. I mean, yeah, I can't picture myself packing both of those for the trip to Antarctica. It's kind of one or the other, and then because there are so many epic and amazing landscape opportunities, that 100 to 400 is going to give you versatility that you won't get from the 500. So my take would be, you've got the perfect trio of lenses. If you want something longer, rent the 600 TC or the 800 PF, like, and then you'd have plenty of reach. The 800 might be pretty amazing in Antarctica. I would probably bring that, but that's a different beast than choosing. I got rid of the 500 PF, with the 100 to 400 and the 1.4 teleconverter. I didn't feel I needed it. So there you go.
Okay. Couple of sort of Z8 settings questions. I know we don't want to get too much in the weeds on some of these things. Where is it? Al asks, he says, when using the F1 and F2 buttons, it seems you have to hold the button down as opposed to a button working like a toggle switch. Is that correct? Can a function button be programmed to act like a switch?
Are we talking, does Al have a Z8?
Z8, yes.
Okay. So,
All right.
well, it depends. There's recall shooting function, and then there's recall shooting function hold. Those are two different menu options. So when you're going, you have to be very specific. I talk about reprogramming the function buttons to do hybrid focus, for example, using recall shooting functions hold, or the standard shooting mode, having that recall shooting functions button flip you into automatically being 20 frames per second, and having a fast shutter speed and auto ISO and the right focus settings for capturing, say, a bird in flight that suddenly pops up while you're, shooting some landscape. You can just hit that button and boom, be in burst mode in the right autofocus settings to capture action. Those are recall shooting function hold programs that you're putting onto that button. If you put recall shooting function, yes, you have to hold it down. If you put recall shooting function hold, it locks in all the settings that you programmed until you push it again, and it goes back to where you were before. It's an on-off.
Okay. So Jeff Minch is shooting with a Z6 II. And basically his question is, how high ISO would you go on sort of everyday pictures to allow faster shutter or higher aperture, depending on the need?
I have, since the day I got my original Z6, set it at 20,000. The Leicas here are 6,400. My Z7 II was 6,400. The Z9 6,400. I'll occasionally go over that if the need arises, but I feel it's pretty equivalent setting the Z6 or the Z6 II to 20,000. It's just an amazing backlit sensor with the less dense megapixels packed into the same size sensor. It has less noise, and it's particularly in this age where we can use Lightroom's denoise or OM1's no noise AI or DxO's pure raw, or Topaz's denoise. Those engines are so good at demosaicing and maintaining sharpness while getting rid of noise. Not to mention the fact the sensor is so good to begin with. It's just an age of being able to shoot in the dark. One of my favorite images from Costa Rica was at 10,000 ISO with the Z9. In Costa Rica, I bumped it up because you're shooting in dark woods and you've got conditions with spectacular scenes in low light, and you need a faster shutter speed to stop motion. And using DxO's pure raw, I got a great result. So.
Okay.
But I think just in general, everyday usage for me, my line with the Z6 II is 20,000. And if it's well exposed, you may not even need to run it through the denoise algorithm. Just pull the noise sliders a little bit, holding the option key down, and look at it in black and white as you do it. And then pull the masking slider, holding the option key, looking at that mask. And so make it so that any sharpening that you're applying isn't applied to the noise in the image, and you'll be able to see the noise holding down the option key and pulling that masking slider. That's kind of the whole trick to the game. So,
All right. To be honest, a bunch of the other Nikon questions are really like so specific that I think it would be hard to you'd end up taking so much time going over them. So. Darren, do you have a question over there? Sorry, I called you Daryl. I was thinking of Charlie. I was thinking of Charlie.
RC's asking about care of camera and lens if you're in a humid environment like Costa Rica, changing lenses, stuff like that. What are your best practices in that sort of situation?
I've shot a lot in humid conditions. It's kind of the same as I always do with changing lenses. It's, hold the camera upside down, take off the lens, put the next lens on, have it ready to go, and then put the cap back on the lens. That way, you're not dropping anything into, but I didn't have any problem with condensation getting in to my lens, even in super humid conditions. You don't want to walk from a super hot, humid environment directly into a super cold air conditioned room and pop open your camera bag and take the cap off your lens,
Yeah.
Or vice versa. Same thing. You don't you're out skiing and you got your camera in your pack and you're going for lunch and pull it out to look at images. You're just going to fog everything inside the camera from condensation, from cold meets hot. So just, watch for those extreme temperature changes, walking from air conditioning out of air conditioning. Otherwise, I think you're fine. And just by leaving your camera in the bag and letting it adjust over 45 minutes or an hour as you take a shower and get a snack after your shoot, you should be able to be fine and pull it out in your air-conditioned room.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to do the same thing in the winter.
Yep. Winter and summer.
Yeah. When I go out shooting in the winter, I'll come back and actually just leave my bag in the garage where it's sort of not as cold, and let it sort of come to temperature and then bring it in before I open it up and start taking cards out.
Yep.
So
exactly.
All right, let's see. What else have I got here? A question about black and white processing. David Williams asks, he's been shooting a lot more in black and white, uses Photoshop and on one. Wondering if you recommend any software plugins for black and white or anything special in the way you process with black and white.
So when I'm working in Lightroom, I just click the black and white button and work with contrast and tone the same way I would with a color image. But then you have that beauty of that black and white section where it would be hue, saturation, and luminance. And you can just adjust the luminosity of the different color channels, and that's really nice. You can darken the sky just by pulling blue towards the dark. On one, I really like some of their black and white presets, the film emulations. If you go into their built-in stock presets and effects, I'll raw process the image in color, and then I'll go in and apply a preset and effects, and then I'll back out to develop again and start playing with the underlying tone a little bit, maybe boost contrast more, maybe bring shadows even darker. Now that you're not dealing with color melting down and you're just looking at pure tonality, you can do some different things in the raw process. And that works really well. On one has wonderful black and white presets.
I think the black and white filter and effects is wonderful. The one tip I'd give everybody, I actually use their presets for black and white a lot, just to sort of get a sense of tonality and stuff. But for some reason, and I've said something to them about this, they love putting borders. For some reason they think black and white photos need borders.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I do, and all that is they add the borders filter, the effects filter.
In effects.
So all I do is go in, delete that, pick a preset, click it, delete the borders filter and then update the styles so that that preset no longer has the borders filter added to it.
Smart. Look at the big
yeah.
brain. I should do that.
I keep asking them for so
you could do that with some of the textures they apply to some of the black and white stuff too.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes they'll throw textures in there that you don't necessarily want.
You know, for a long time I used
NYX,
Silver Effects. And it's still around and it still does a good job.
Yeah.
You know, I've
great.
just been using fewer and fewer plugins these days, and I haven't felt the Lightroom's black and white mode or On One's effects filter have really left me wanting.
No.
So
100%.
I do understand. I've got a couple of workshop people who I've talked with who shoot a lot of black and white, and they still use Silver Effects. And you know, if it works for you, that's great. You can definitely get, you know, a trial to see if it makes sense. But
I used it for years when I was a pure Photoshop bridge user with plugins prior to Lightroom, and maybe even some in the early, you know, version 1, version 2 of Lightroom. And then things just got so good. And I didn't do a ton of black and white, you know. And my other little trick with black and white, whether I'm shooting Nikon or whether I'm shooting Leica, is, you know, when I flip into black and white mode, I tend to shoot RAW plus JPEG. Well, interestingly, I do that with Nikon. I don't, or with Leica, because for some reason my Leica files don't come in with the black and white profile. My Nikon ones come in black and white, and I have to flip them to color, the RAW file, which I love.
Yeah.
And I haven't figured out a way to make Lightroom show me the profile that was attached to the RAW file when I'm shooting black and white in the Leica. So I have it shoot a RAW plus a JPEG. And oftentimes I find that JPEG is beautiful. And all I need to do is tweak that just a little bit because I like what they chose to do in camera. And I won't delete the RAW file. You know, maybe at some time I need something I can push further. But a lot of times I just run with the JPEG straight out of the camera. So, or maybe a little tweak to contrast.
Well, it's that time again. Time to say goodbye. We'll be back on the 5th of September. Woody's already got the page up, hudsonhenry.com/office hours. You can submit questions. If we make any changes to decide, I think we'll just do another sort of random Q&A for next month as well. We'll have been back from our Oregon Coast workshop. Maybe we'll have some stuff to show.
Yeah, you know, you guys, I think we'll do another gallery one after that, potentially.
Okay.
Not this next one, but if you have some suggestions of things you'd like to see discussed, you know, or a gallery submission suggestion, you know, go ahead and let us know that when you sign up for office hours along with your question. That'd be great.
Right.
Yeah.
And remember, if you've got specific 2024 workshops you'd like to be on the wait list for, send it to rick@hudsonhenry.com. Put 2024 workshop request in the subject line so that helps me filter things out, and I'll make sure that you get on the appropriate wait lists for the workshops you're interested in.
Yeah, and if you're considering Mazatlan, make up or any place for the eclipse, make up your mind fast about where that's going to be and book your lodging and your transportation. If you're coming to Mazatlan with us, make sure that you get your flight into Mazatlan squared away. We'll help you with that. If you've already signed up. We only have a few slots left, but that needs to happen pretty fast because it's all the places it's going to be are getting more and more popular. So
yeah, and I imagine by the end of the week, Mazatlan will be sold out or just have one spot left. So,
yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, take care, everybody. We'll see you in a month. Have a lovely August.
And wherever you are, David Archer, if you watch this, I hope you're having fun in Europe. He's traveling all over.
You think he's going to be watching this? I don't.